Welcome to Chino Y Chicano.
I'm Matt Chan, the Chino.
And I'm Enrique Serna, the Chicano. And we have a very good friend that is joining us on this podcast episode. We had to do a little arm twisting to get him to join us. But our buddy Eugene Tagawa. Hi, Eugene. How you doing?
Hey, you guys.
Hey.
Yeah.
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. And, listen, we want to have Eugene on because Eugene is, well, for one thing, he's a very good friend of ours. We've known Eugene since what? I've known him since 1978 when I went to work at King, where you were a graphic artist there. How many years did you work at King?
31 years and 10 months.
He remembered down to the second, practically.
Sort of like how prisoners remember their sentence.
But he got out. He got commuted.
Yeah, he got 2 months of commuting of the sentence for good behavior.
Well, like I said, we've known Eugene from our King days way back when. And Eugene is not only a great artist, but he's also a great cookie maker. Eugene makes the best chocolate chip and peanut butter cookies. And when you have one, it's sort of like crack. You can't stop. So you eat the whole thing. And so he makes the best cookies ever. But Eugene also is a photographer. And you have, it seemed like everywhere you go, particularly when we would have gatherings at parties, but even things out in the community, you always had your still camera with you. So Eugene, I mean, photography, is that like a hobby or a love? What?
It's a hobby.
Yeah.
It's never been a profession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why did you always had the camera with you? Why did you just wanted to track what was going on?
Yeah. I always like to take pictures.
Yeah.
You told me once that one of the reasons you took pictures at events, and you always volunteered your services to people, was to show people what happened who couldn't be at the events.
Yeah.
And was that for the community, or is it for what?
Well, mostly those community events for the community nonprofits.
Yeah. You just wanted to keep track of the history of what was going on in the community. When we say community, we're really talking about the Asian community here in Seattle, and particularly, the Japanese American community that from, you're very well connected with, and particularly the number of nonprofits that you give your time to. So that's what you do. Now, okay, one of the reasons that we wanted to have Eugene on, other than to talk about how great he makes cookies and all these things, and because he's our pal, is that, Matt, you wrote an article about Eugene.
Oh, for the International Examiner.
Right. So tell us about that article and why you wrote it.
Well, okay. So being a television guy, right, and doing video projects and stuff, I'm keenly aware of what they call IP, intellectual property. And there's nothing worse than being ripped off. Like when I did Hoarders, a couple of networks ripped off the show. One was called Hoarding Buried Alive. And people say imitation is a sincerest form of flattery. But when it comes to intellectual property, that's stealing. It's not flattery at all. And I got fed up of seeing Eugene's pictures that he's taken over the years that documented some of the most important events for the Asian community in Seattle, misattributed, used just randomly, and never attributing, giving thanks to the photographer, which was Eugene Tagawa.
He wasn't getting the credit he deserved. Basically.
No, and to this day, he still doesn't. So I said, look, enough is enough. We need to show the world what Eugene really does, because he's a humble, modest guy. And I just said, look, that's the least I can do for my buddy.
Yeah. So you wrote this article that was in the International Examiner, and it had to do with a photo that was taken. There was a protest in the ID. Uncle Bob Santos was, always involved in these things. He's in that photo. But actually, Eugene, you tell us a bit of the history of that. What? How were you? What was that photo from? What was the date? And give us the context of.
Yeah, well, let's set the stage of the photo.
Yeah.
The photo is probably one of the most used photos in the community because it has the iconic Humbal's not hot dog signs, and it has Uncle Bob, and it has all these, 70s protesters. So that's what the picture is, and that's why it is so famous.
So what was the date on this, Eugene?
It was November 14th, 1972. So 49 years ago.
Wow. So what was the setting? What was going on that day?
Well, it was a protest march that was going to the HUD office, Housing and Urban Development Office in downtown Seattle. And it was to protest the effects of the building of the Kingdom on the Chinatown ID. And so some of the demands were more housing for elders in the ID.
And at that time, the elders were really a lot of Filipino men who lived in the single room occupancy hotels.
Yes.
That was basically squalor at that time. I mean, people look at the CID now and they say like, yeah, it's okay. It's still kind of funky. But man, back then it was really funky, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were with your sister that day, Eugene?
Yeah, she was definitely part of the march. I mean, I was running all over the place taking pictures. So I wasn't actually, marching alongside anybody. I was all over the place.
Now, what was your sister's name?
Kathy Tagawa.
Okay.
Later, Kathy Tagawa Sugiyama.
Yeah.
She married Al Sugiyama the next year.
Right. And Al was very active in the community. And
yeah.
What was the name of the organization that he helped lead in the community?
Well, he started Center for Career Alternatives. Right. And that was a long time help agency in the community that helped lots of people, a lot of immigrants, a lot of dropouts, a lot of it did a lot of
just great work for giving people job opportunities, right? Job training and skill training and things like that.
Yeah, alternatives to college educations. It basically gave people a second chance.
Right. And vocational opportunities as well, along with that. Yeah. And it was just basically helping people out in the community that needed, a lift up.
So the underserved people.
Right.
So getting back to the photo, right? I mean, one of the reasons it's iconic is because Uncle Bob is in there. But you told me something that really was shocking to me that I didn't know, and it was verified by a number of people. Tell us about what was Uncle Bob's role that day, because people assume he led the march.
Well, yeah, he was definitely part of the planning process, and I think it was his suggestion that some people meet with HUD officials. So that's what made that the destination of the march, the HUD office. But there were lots of leaders in that photo that shows that meeting at St. Peter Claver. You see sitting at the head table are the Bacho brothers and Frank Iragon. And also, you can't see in that picture is Al Sugiyama, who was sitting behind the front table. So he's not in those pictures. But he was definitely one of the organizers too. So there were a lot of people that were, I guess, leading the march. And Bob was definitely there. But it was the younger people that actually organized and planned it.
Now that picture, if you look at that picture, the Humbal's not hot dogs.
Yeah.
Which Uncle Bob later used in a book as a title of a book that he wrote. But who wrote that? Who came up with that slogan?
Well, I remember it being my sister and I. We came up with that slogan.
And was she carrying the sign?
No, that sign was being carried by, in that picture, I think that sign is being carried by Mrs. Bacho. Frank Aragon calls her Auntie. Auntie, I can't remember her first name. It's Pete and Norris Bacho's mother.
Yeah. In that shot that is in the article, with all the people at the planning meeting, what was interesting to me too, that three of the gang of four were in there: Larry Gossett, Bob Santos, and Roberto Maestas.
Yes.
And they were all part of this and part of the planning. Now, had Bernie White Bear kind of joined them, or was it just kind of they were just there being community activists and they really hadn't formed together at that point?
I'm not sure of the actual.
I think they might have already been together at that point because, Bob was the guy that at St. Peter's that kind of, he ran the place as far as where people could come and organize and meet. And I think they had already been together, and that I can't give the full date because I don't know it right off the top of my head. But remember that what really brought them together was the Daybreak Star demonstrations where Bernie White Bear led that, and to get the property there for what is now Daybreak Star and the location there for United Indians of All Tribes. But I think that's when they really came together. The date on this, it might have been, not long after that or close to that time. But what's interesting, I think a lot of people always looked at that Humbo's Not Hot Dogs as something that really, because Uncle Bob used that for the title of the book that he did. But you really didn't get the credit. You and your sister didn't get the credit for the fact that it was, you guys came up with that. And so I think we don't want to knock Uncle Bob here. We love Uncle Bob. But the fact is that we wanted to make sure that Eugene, that you and your sister got the credit for that photo, that iconic photo, and that slogan, which is still very apropos today and that people remember. And so that's why we wanted you here, Eugene, so that you got the credit that you deserve. But the fact, too, is that you've always been a chronicler through your photos of the history of the ID and the community. And you need to be celebrated for that. So that's what we're doing. We wanted to make sure you got that credit. But I just think that you need to know that people appreciate that work. And so that's we're saying shout out to you, Eugene.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one of the things that you have also been involved in is as someone that you were raised in one of the incarceration camps. So tell us that history.
You were actually born
on the way too, right? What was that?
Well, it was when my family was at the Puyallup Assembly Center, which was called euphemistically Camp Harmony.
Yeah, with no harmony, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about no harmony, but so my mother was 9 months pregnant when she had to leave home.
Oh,
and
with you, right?
Yeah, because they actually had to get up and out of their homes, leave their homes in late May of 42, and I was born in the first week of June.
Wow.
So it was right after they got into the camp at Puyallup that I was born. So my mother actually got to leave the camp to go to Pierce County Hospital. That's where I was born.
To have you, yeah.
So your family had to transport a newborn to Minidoka.
Yes, that's along with my two older sisters who were like 1 and 2 at that time.
Wow.
So my parents and my mother's parents were our family unit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they ever talk about that with you?
Well, in general terms, not You know, it's like, well, my father died when I was 10, so I don't remember ever talking to him about it. But my mom, she never complained about it. I mean, she would tell me stories of specific incidents, but she didn't do a lot of complaining about it.
Did she
And
just take it as this is what it was, and you had to deal with it? Was that how she took it more than anything else?
yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, I never really got into deep conversations with her about it.
So, so what motivated you to be so passionate about Minidoka and the pilgrimage and just honoring, that tragedy in Asian American history? I mean, why is it so important to you these days?
Well, I tell you, in 2008, I went on my first pilgrimage, and it changed my life actually because uh, just being there at, on the site, where I had lived, what, 70 years before. It was, I don't know, just to be there in that environment. You walk on the dusty ground, and you feel the really hot sun. It was in the 90s because we went in late June, and I don't know, just hard to describe. Just feeling connected to something, because when you're on the pilgrimage, there are a lot of other people that are there for the same reason, right? Just to honor their predecessors. Uh, and every year it's different because you meet different people, of course. But, this is
And they all
hard to
come there.
describe.
They all come there for for different reasons. But for people that don't understand, uh, a lot of the concentration camps, for lack of a better term,
Yeah,
around the West Coast, they all have these pilgrimages where people go back, and it's a thing to really keep alive the memory of what was done to the Japanese Americans, right?
yeah,
And so Minidoka is just one of many,
yeah,
but it's the one that your family went to. And a lot of the families, the JA families in the area, identify kind of what camp their families were in, right? That's kind of an interesting thing too.
yeah, yeah. That's like you know a starter of a conversation with, when you meet somebody, like
Yeah.
another JA's. Oh, what camp were you in? Or what camp was your family in? And then if they say, to me, if they say Minidoka, the next question is, oh, what block?
Mm.
Yeah. And JA, by the way, Japanese American. So that
Yeah.
those out there who are wondering, what does JA mean? But through the years, you you've documented that, and the times that
Yeah.
you've gone back. Um, that you're really kind of keeping track of the history of these events. That I know that this still hits you hard, right? Because your family was, if there was upheaval, you had to go through this.
Yeah.
So, yeah. How about your sisters? How did they feel about, did both sisters, how many sisters you have, by the way? I think I know of two.
Two older sisters.
Okay.
My
right,
younger sister, Kathy, she passed in 2012. So
right.
10 years ago, actually, now.
Yeah.
And you have a brother also.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Have they gone on it as well?
One of my older sisters and my brother came to the pilgrimage with me in 2012.
Yeah. So for you, why is this important to continue to be connected to that, and I know you have nieces that you're really close to. Is it all about sharing that history and making sure that they know their family's legacy?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. But just being part of this event is important because I keep getting these messages here.
That's okay.
Being part of this event is important to me because it's just I know. How do I describe this? See, I told you I'd be bad.
No, just be, tell us what you feel. I mean, this is very emotional stuff because I would think that, even though you were a baby when you went through this, it's just knowing that your family had to go through this ordeal. And, that's, and your family's loyalty was questioned just like a lot of other families. And it's important that people know history like this, especially now in a time when we're like fighting for this democracy that we have and people that want to tear it apart. I just think that that's so important to have. Yeah. So I would think that would hit you hard.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Since I was 3 years old when we were actually released, I don't have any direct memories of it. I only know what stories my mother would tell me, and so I go just to honor my parents because I know superficially what they went through, and also my mother's parents, and just to go back there and kind of reconnect and honor them is important to me. And the reason I've been going every year is because I just want to be part of this thing where a lot of people who have never experienced that go. And it's just, by the end of the 4 days, there's this bond that has been created with all these people. And just knowing that they're all connected, it's just really a great thing.
Who organizes these pilgrimages?
Well, it's an all volunteer committee of mostly JAs, but we have other allies too that help us.
Is it through the Japanese American Citizens League, or is it just kind of different groups that are organizing?
It's an independent group, but it right. With definite strong ties to all the other JA nonprofits.
Yeah,
and the churches.
I think as the years march on, I think people forget, and they didn't even want to remember at the time, how horrendous this was. I mean, they make comparisons, current day comparisons, but there is really no comparison. I mean, the Japanese Americans that were interned were Americans. I mean, they were American as your neighbor next door, and they were uprooted simply because of their culture and the color of their skin. It is the seminal event that really changed the whole trajectory of Asian Americans in this country. And I don't think enough is done or said about that. Of what happened to Japanese Americans during that time. So I'm just thankful that there's these pilgrimages and that people can draw attention to it every year. And I just wish, the JAs are there will be more vocal to tell the world. I know that, a lot of them kind of just talk amongst themselves and do push out some, but the younger people are really making it an issue. And I think that's a good thing.
Right. And for all those donkeys out there that bitch and moan about critical race theory and make it something that it isn't, this is what's important, to understand the country's history, not to make anybody feel bad, but to realize that, look, in our democracy, we've had a lot of awful moments. And they need to understand these things. Young people need to understand these things. They need to know our history. Just like I think every family needs to know, if you have a connection to another country, how your parents got here and why they came here, and understanding all of that. So, Eugene, I salute you for all your work that you do and everything you've done in the community that, that this is why we wanted to have you on this podcast, is to just so that people know who you are, and the fact that those people that aren't there kind of waving their hands, look at my stuff, but you do that. And so I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, well, oftentimes in community, people get celebrated for just doing their job.
Yeah.
Which I have kind of an issue with, but I think, in our small way, we're trying to make sure that you are honored, because not many people are dedicated to do what you do.
And to consistently stay up with it. Yeah. So, Eugene, here's one thing I'd like to have you do for me, is that if you could send me a series of some of your photos that you've done in the ID as well as on the trip, and then we'll put them up on our website so people can see them, and so that they know the work that you do, and see the good photos that you always take. And by the way, Eugene took photos of my kids when they were little, and he even took he even took one of my son in a husky sweater, which, which I know that he cherishes very much. All right, Eugene, thank you. It wasn't that painful, was it? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yeah.
But well, you know what? I was going to read you this quote.
Please do.
That's it sort of jumped out at me. That sort of sums up what the pilgrimage is all about. But remember last year during the inauguration, Amanda Gorman, the young youth poet laureate,
right?
She read that poem called "The Hill We Climb," right? But in it, right in the middle of it, you can't have this part of the thing, because I always get all choked up when I read this. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. I thought that was just perfect.
It is.
Right? So I don't.
Well,
it is.
That does sum it up. Thank you, Eugene, for your contribution to the world.
Yeah. Well, to our world, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
All right. Thanks, Eugene.
Okay. I hope this is heavily edited.
Thank you, Eugene. All right.
Okay, thank you.
You're a guy.
Thanks guys.